I've explored dozens of abandoned places over the years-old schools, shuttered churches, factories left to rot. I thought I was used to peeling paint and collapsed ceilings, that nothing could really get under my skin anymore. I was wrong. The moment I stepped into St. Augustine's Asylum, I knew something was off. Not the usual kind of unsettling, but something heavier. A silence that didn't feel empty, but full. They say the asylum was shut down in 1976 after a patient riot, but that's not the truth. The staff didn't evacuate, they vanished. One day, they were there, running experiments and keeping patients locked away in rested beds. The next, nothing. No trace, no goodbye, no bodies. What fascinated me most was the sealed-off section, the so-called Echo Ward. There weren't any official blueprints that mentioned it. I only found out through a cryptic forum post buried deep on a site for urban explorers. Someone had written, "Don't listen too closely. It remembers what you say." That one sentence stuck with me for days. I couldn't shake it. So I decided I had to see it for myself. I didn't go in alone. I brought 3 people with me. Kevin, skeptical, sarcastic, the kind of guy who needed proof for everything. Lex, our videographer, brave but nervous under pressure. And Ian, quiet, curious, the one who always got us into strange places. We planned it all out. Night entry, GoPros, flashlights, bolt cutters, a way out if we needed it. We entered through a collapsed section of the wall near the cafeteria. The air was thick with mildew, and the smell of rust and wet plaster clung to everything. We found the sealed entrance to the Echo Ward after nearly an hour of searching, tucked behind a fallen bookshelf and 2 collapsed beams. The door was different, heavy, iron-plated, painted over in layers. And above it, barely visible in the peeling paint, were faded letters that read, Ward 6, Echo Therapy Unit. Lex raised her camera and whispered, "Creepy as hell." The words hadn't even finished leaving her mouth when we all froze. We heard it, her voice, the exact same phrase. Creepy as hell, but no one else had repeated it. It wasn't an echo. It came from the other side of the door. We stood still, our breath caught in our throats. Kevin broke the silence with a forced laugh. Said it was just acoustics, sound bouncing weird in the hallway. None of us believed it. Ian clipped the padlock with a bolt cutter and pulled the door open. We stepped inside the Echo Ward, and the door groaned shut behind us. The air changed the moment we crossed the threshold. It was denser, humid like a greenhouse. The walls were lined with rooms' observation windows and rusted plaques above each one. Therapy chambers, maybe, or isolation cells. Each door had a number and a thin glass slot in the middle, dark and clouded from years of decay. Kevin cracked another joke, something about redecorating. And then we heard his voice mimic him. Place needs a coat of paint, exactly the way he said it. Same cadence, same rhythm. But no one had repeated him. Lex's hand tightened around the camera. Did anyone else hear that? We all had. I kept walking, flashlight in a death grip, but a sound tugged at me soft, almost like breathing, and then I heard something worse. My voice. Whispering something I had never said aloud. He never loved you. I stopped cold, my spine stiffened, my ears rang. I hadn't thought about him in years. Not since the night he walked out and I locked the pain away. I had never told anyone what he said to me, what he did. But the ward knew. We pressed on in silence. Rooms 5 and 6 had busted gurneys and chains bolted into the walls. Room 7 had nothing but a torn straitjacket hanging from the ceiling. Then we reached the final room, double doors with a symbol smeared in something dark and sticky, not paint. Lex reached out to touch it and immediately pulled back. Her hand was trembling. It's still wet. The doors opened on their own. We didn't speak. We just stepped inside. And the moment we did, the doors slammed shut behind us. Everything went quiet. Not the silence of an empty building, but the kind that presses in, like being underwater. You could feel the absence of sound. It was alive. Then came the whispers. All of us at once heard our own voices. Each word we had spoken since entering the ward repeated back to us one after another in a strange, overlapping chorus. But they didn't stop there. The voices continued beyond what we remembered saying. Kevin's voice spoke first. I watched him drown. Lex's followed. It should have been me instead of her. Then Ian's. I buried it in the yard. No one knows. And finally mine. I wish Mom never made it out. My knees nearly gave out. I had never, not once, admitted that thought to myself, let alone anyone else. I had buried that guilt, that dark, cruel feeling, and the whisper brought it up like it had been listening for years. I never said that, I whispered. And then my voice whispered back to me, but you thought it. That was when panic started to crack the group. Ian bolted toward the door, slamming against it, pulling, screaming. It didn't move. Then, with a sudden wrench, it flew open, and what waited on the other side wasn't the hallway we had entered through. The corridor had changed. It was longer, twisted. The paint on the walls was no longer peeling, but fresh and slick, as if it had just been applied in blood. There were more rooms than before. Each one now had a nameplate: Kevin, Lex, Ian, and one with mine. Patient number 043. Subject: local reflection trauma. I didn't understand what it meant. But I knew one thing: we weren't in the asylum anymore. We were inside something else. Something that remembered everything we had ever said. And worse, everything we never dared to say aloud. We stared at the hallway in stunned silence. It had stretched, warped into something unrecognizable. The walls glistened faintly like they were sweating. The overhead lights buzzed softly, casting a sickly yellow glow that seemed to move even when nothing else did. And those doors, those horrible new doors, each bore a name. Kevin's, Lex's, Ian's, mine. It was Ian who moved first. He stepped forward slowly, like a man trying not to wake something sleeping beneath the floor. He walked toward the door with his name on it. "This is a trick," he muttered. "It's some kind of psychological setup, like a mirror maze or subliminal audio loops," but his voice trembled. He didn't believe his own words. We followed him hesitantly, each of us sticking close but unwilling to look at our own doors for too long. There was something about seeing your name engraved into a place that should be impossible. It felt like a violation, like something had been waiting for us long before we arrived. Ian reached out to his door, just lightly touching the edge. The metal hissed under his fingers like it was reacting to his skin, and then it opened. We didn't see what was inside. The moment the door swung wide, darkness spilled out, not like shadow, but like ink. It slid over the floor, coating his boots, and before any of us could move or call out, Ian stepped forward and vanished into the black. The door closed behind him. We ran to it. Lex pounded on the frame, screaming his name. Kevin tried to pry it open, but it wouldn't budge. Not even a millimeter. Then the whispering returned. But this time, it wasn't a chorus. It was one voice. Ian's, "I'm not alone," he whispered. "It's in here. It's wearing my face." I felt my skin go cold. Lex backed away from the door, tears welling in her eyes. "This isn't real," she said. "It's playing with us. That's all this is. It's some elaborate prank," or her sentence was cut off by the sound of her door opening behind her. No one touched it. We all turned and stared. Lex's nameplate gleamed under the flickering lights. "Don't," I said, grabbing her arm. "Don't go in there." But she looked at me with wide, glassy eyes and whispered, "It knows about my sister." Then she pulled away. She didn't run. She didn't scream. She just walked into the room like she'd been there before, like it was inevitable. The door shut gently behind her. Now it was just Kevin and me. I felt an annoying sense of dread growing in my stomach. Something was pushing at the back of my mind. Not a memory, more like a pressure. Like the place itself was digging through me, peeling back layers of thoughts I didn't know I'd buried. Kevin started pacing. He wouldn't look at his door. He kept muttering to himself, hands twitching, eyes darting toward the shadows creeping along the floor. "We've got to go," he said. "There has to be another exit, a window, anything." I didn't move. I couldn't. My eyes were locked on my door. Patient number 043, subject, vocal reflection trauma. What did that mean? Vocal reflection? Was that what this place was doing, reflecting our thoughts, our confessions? Or were we just hearing what we always feared to hear? Was it actually repeating our voices or just pulling things from us and dressing them in our tone? I turned to Kevin. "You said you didn't believe in any of this? That it was just echoes, just tricks?" He didn't answer. His eyes were on something behind me. I turned slowly. My door was open. There was no sound, no whisper. Just the door, slightly ajar, a sliver of black waiting inside. I didn't want to go in. Every instinct in my body screamed against it. But something else, something deeper, whispered that I had to. I took one step forward, then another. Behind me, I heard Kevin shout, "Wait," but it was too late. The door yawned wide, and the darkness swallowed me whole. Inside, it was cold. The kind of cold that made your breath catch, that crawled into your lungs and clung to your ribs. I couldn't see anything. I reached out and felt walls padded, but soaked through. Everything was damp. The air smelled like mildew and copper. Then the voice started. Not a whisper, a full voice. Mine. I lied about what happened that night, it said. I told everyone I was asleep when the fire started. But I wasn't. I heard her scream. I stood frozen. "That's not true," I whispered. But the voice repeated it, louder, clearer. I heard her scream. And I did nothing. "No," I said, shaking my head. "That's not what happened." I tried to get to her. I tried. "You hesitated," the voice snapped. "You waited. You watched the flames grow. You let her die." I crumpled to my knees. The voice was inside me now, curling through my thoughts, digging deep. "You always wondered why no one blamed you, why they believed you. But you know the truth, don't you?" I covered my ears, but it didn't help. The words weren't coming from outside anymore. They were inside my head. I wanted to scream, to tear my own voice out of my skull. Then the voice went quiet, and something else began to speak. Not me, not a reflection. It was new, ancient, cold. "You don't belong outside anymore," it said. "You fed us, now stay." The door behind me slammed shut, and I was alone. I don't know how long I sat there in the dark. Time didn't pass the same way inside the room. There was no sound, no light, no sense of motion. Only that heavy, suffocating presence in the air, like the walls themselves were listening, watching, waiting for something more to pull out of me. But eventually I moved, crawled along the soaked floor until my fingers brushed something sharp. A wall, a bed frame? No, it was metal, a handle. The door. It opened this time without resistance, almost too easily, and I stumbled back out into the hallway. But it wasn't the same hallway I had entered. The walls were narrower now, pulsing faintly beneath cracked layers of paint. The floor tiles had changed colors, yellowed and soft like old teeth. A buzzing hum vibrated just at the edge of hearing, and the air felt thicker, like I was walking through syrup. I didn't see Kevin at first. Not until I turned the corner and found him standing in front of his own door, still unopened. His back was to me, but I could tell by the way his shoulders shook that something had happened. He didn't turn around when I called his name. "I heard it," he said, voice hollow. My own voice, calling me in. He finally turned. His face was pale and wet with sweat. His eyes had sunk into his skull, ringed with something like soot. "It told me what I did," he whispered. But it wasn't just my voice anymore, it was hers. My little sister's, the way she used to cry before. He trailed off. I wanted to comfort him, to say something human, but the words didn't come. They felt useless in this place. Then he looked up and I saw something behind his eyes, something fractured. "I'm not going in," he said. "You hear me? I'm not doing it. You went in, they went in, and none of you came out the same." "You don't have to," I said. But even as I spoke, we both knew it wasn't true. The echo ward doesn't let you choose. It waits until you're too weak to resist. He backed away from the door, hands trembling. "I'm going to find a way out. There has to be a stairwell. Or maybe if we retrace our steps." His sentence was cut off. The lights above us blinked once, then twice. And then his voice, Kevin's voice, came from further down the hallway. "Come with me," it said. I found a way out. We both froze. It wasn't coming from his mouth. He was still standing beside me, staring down the corridor in disbelief. "Come with me," it repeated. I found a way out. It sounded wrong, off by just a few tones, like someone wearing his voice like a mask. Kevin took a step back. "It's mimicking me now," he whispered. "Why is it doing that?" We turned slowly, and at the end of the corridor, a figure stepped into view. It looked like Kevin, same clothes, same height, but its eyes were blank, mouth slack, arms too long by several inches, and it was smiling in a way Kevin never did. My blood turned to ice. The figure spoke again. "You can trust me. I'm you." Kevin ran. He bolted down the hallway in the opposite direction, and I followed, heart pounding so loud I thought it might drown out everything else. The hallway shifted as we moved. Doors appeared where there hadn't been any. Walls narrowed. The lights flickered, dimmed, then came back in a different shade entirely. At one point, I turned to check if the mimic was still following us, but it was gone. We came to a split in the corridor. Kevin took the left. I went right, shouting for him to stop, to stay together. But he didn't listen. His footsteps faded into the maze behind me. And then I was alone again. This section of the ward looked cleaner. The walls were whiter, the floor less decayed. There were signs posted along the walls, official looking, like from the 1970s, listing medical procedures, vocal regression therapy, reflexive speech rehabilitation. I didn't understand what any of it meant. At the end of the hallway was a room with a partially open door. I stepped inside. It was an office. There were chairs bolted to the floor and a desk covered in dust. But what drew my attention was the tape recorder on the table. An old one, the kind used for therapy notes. Its red light blinked slowly. Still on. Still recording. I pressed rewind, and then I hit play. Static crackled through the speakers. Then a voice emerged. My voice, clear, calm, reciting details I didn't remember ever saying. "Patient 043 reports recurring dreams of fire and guilt," it said. "Denies responsibility for the event, but subconsciously accepts blame." I felt the room tilt around me. "I never said that," I whispered. The tape continued. "Subject exhibits signs of disassociation. Voice stress analysis reveals internal conflict regarding maternal loss. Continues to refer to self in third person under duress." I backed away from the desk. This wasn't a recording of a therapy session. It was a diagnosis, a file on me. The door behind me creaked shut. Then the lights went out. When the lights went out, I froze. I couldn't even bring myself to breathe. The silence that followed was more than quiet. It was the kind that makes your skin feel wrong, like your body isn't quite yours anymore. The darkness wasn't just an absence of light. It felt like it had weight, like it was pressing down on me from all sides, thick and oily and alive. I reached for my flashlight, but when I flicked it on, the beam barely cut through the dark. The air shimmered around it, like heat waves on asphalt, though the temperature had dropped to something close to freezing. I stepped away from the desk, back toward the door, but my foot caught on something. I looked down, slowly lowering the flashlight. It was a tape. Another one, unlabeled. I picked it up and, without thinking, slipped it into the recorder and hit play. This time, there was no static, just a voice. Kevin's. She didn't help me, it said. She stood there and watched. My chest tightened. She thought I didn't see her, but I did. I saw the look on her face. She was scared, not of what was happening. Scared of what I'd say later. Scared of me. There was a long pause. Then another voice answered, mine. I didn't know what to do. But you did nothing, Kevin's voice hissed back. I slammed the stop button and stumbled back. This place wasn't just mimicking us anymore. It was pulling pieces of our lives, our guilt, our shame, and playing them out like theater, like we were actors in some sick performance. I didn't know how the echo ward worked or how long it had been watching people like me, but it wasn't just repeating things we'd said. It was digging through the rotten parts of us and using our voices to stitch them together into something worse. I needed to find Kevin. I needed to get out. The door opened without me touching it. I stepped into a new hallway, narrower, darker, somehow even more wrong than the last. Every step I took echoed behind me like there was someone just a second out of sync. The fluorescent lights flickered above, but when they did, the shadows didn't move the way they should have. They twitched against the walls, reaching forward like they were trying to follow me. Then I heard it. Laughter. Kevin's voice again. But it wasn't his normal laugh, it was hollow, choked, like someone had taught a machine how to imitate humor. I followed the sound. At the end of the hallway was a door marked Therapy Observation Room. I pushed it open. Inside was a glass window overlooking one of the cells we had passed earlier. Room 3. And inside the cell, sitting in a twisted chair bolted to the floor, was Kevin. He looked up at me, smiled, and raised his hand. But something was wrong. His movements were jerky, mechanical, like a marionette with tangled strings. Then his mouth opened, too wide, too fast. You left me, he said. I didn't, I whispered, pressing my hand to the glass. I was trying to find you. You ran, he interrupted. You watched me fall apart. You didn't stop it. The room behind him began to distort, bulging like the walls were breathing. The lights dimmed, and the sound of whispering voices began to rise, hundreds of them, all Kevin's voice, all saying different things at once. I stepped back from the window, heart thundering in my chest. Then I realized he wasn't talking to me anymore. He was talking to himself. The Kevin in the chair repeated the same phrase over and over, voice slowly unraveling into sobs. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Something inside me cracked. I ran. The hallways twisted as I moved, rearranging themselves, doorways appearing and disappearing as if the building was watching my every move and reshaping itself in response. I turned left, then right, then left again, not caring where I ended up. I just needed to get away. Eventually, I stumbled into what looked like a nurse's station, desks overturned, files scattered. A bulletin board still held a few brittle notes with patient names and numbers scrawled in red ink. Some of the names were mine, and Lex's and Ian's, but others were older, much older. One of the notes caught my eye. It read, subjects in echotherapy respond with high emotional yield. Prolonged exposure results in permanent vocal dissociation. Subject voices stored for replication. Stored, replicated, that's what it was doing. It was keeping us. Not just our words, our voices, our identities, the whispers. The mimicry. The shifting rooms, it was all part of a larger mechanism, something ancient and cruel that fed off our memories and emotions, using our own voices as bait for the next victim. I turned and saw a mirror hanging on the far wall, cracked down the center. For a moment, I thought I saw myself in it. But the reflection didn't move when I did. It just stood there, smiling with my face. And then it whispered, It's your turn now." I don't remember how long I wandered. The corridors had changed again, subtle this time. They didn't twist like some nightmare dreamscape, but things were off. The numbering on the doors started repeating. The paint on the walls became fresher the farther I walked, as if I was moving backward through time into a part of the building that hadn't been abandoned quite as long. Some rooms had furniture still in place. Some even had clean linens. But I didn't see Ian or Lex or Kevin. There were no bodies. No blood, just absence. That was worse somehow. I called their names again and again, but my voice felt small in the massive silence of the place. My flashlight flickered. I banged it against my palm, and it steadied, casting a weak beam down yet another identical hallway. I started to wonder if I was just going in circles, or if the ward had more wings than the blueprints had ever shown. Eventually, I stopped walking. I sat down in a corner with my back against a cool brick wall and tried to make sense of it. I went over everything in my head, the voice mimicry, the things we heard, the doors with our names on them, the confessions. Maybe we had been breathing in mold. Maybe there was a gas leak. That would explain the hallucinations, the paranoia, the lost time. I even remembered reading once that abandoned hospitals sometimes had old chemical storage rooms with compounds that could cause vivid dreams, even full-blown psychotic breaks. That had to be it. It had to be. But then I remembered the tapes. The one in the office that had my voice on it, and Lex's file, which knew about her sister, and the way Kevin, rational, stubborn Kevin, had looked when he said, "It's wearing my face." That couldn't all be coincidence, could it? Still, it didn't matter. Theories wouldn't get me out, so I stood up, picked a direction, and walked. Eventually, I reached a stairwell. It was rusted and narrow, the emergency exit light above the door long dead, but it was real, and the door at the bottom wasn't locked. It opened with a creak, spilling me out into a hallway I recognized, one we had passed early on. Before finding the sealed door to the Echo Ward, I didn't run, I didn't scream, I just walked out. Sunlight stung my eyes as I pushed through the collapsed section we had entered through. The trees looked taller than I remembered. The sky felt too bright. The others were gone. I waited by the car for hours, hoping they'd appear. That maybe I had just gotten turned around and they were still inside looking for me, but no one came. Eventually I drove away. I told myself I'd go back, that I'd bring help, call the police, report them missing. But I didn't, because I couldn't explain any of it without sounding insane, because I had no proof, and because part of me was terrified that if I went back, I wouldn't make it out again. I still dream about the word sometimes, about the hallways that go in circles, about doors that open on their own. I hear Kevin laughing behind a wall, Lex humming a song from childhood, Ian crying softly in a room I can't find. But mostly, I hear myself, saying things I don't remember, things I'd never say. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and I swear I can still hear it, the soft, breathless whisper of my own voice in the dark, coming from just behind the wall. And when I speak, when I say something out loud in my empty apartment, there's always a second of silence after, before I hear a faint echo, not bouncing off the walls, not delayed by air, just a whisper, one beat too late, like something listening ... and trying to keep up.